Jó napot kívánok! Ez a .eu, a Pannon Televízió Európai Uniós magazinműsora. A mai adásból megtudhatják, hogy melyek jelenleg az Európai Unió legnagyobb problémái. Nem okozunk meglepetést, a terrorveszélyről és a migráns kérdésről lesz szó, de könnyedebb témákkal is készültünk. Láthatják például, hogy hogyan lehet a házi kedvenceket utaztatni az Európai Unióban, és megmutatjuk, melyek a Facebook sötét oldalai. Tartsanak velünk! Az utóbbi időszak terrorcselekményeit követően egyre többen teszik fel a kérdést, hogyan védi meg magát az Európai Unió a terroristákkal szemben. A Europol TV riportere az Europol igazgatójával beszélgetett.
A hearing to counter terrorism.
The security situation in Europe has changed dramatically in recent years.
In the first 3 months of 2015 alone, 154 people were arrested. So what is the path ahead?
Never, ever, ever give my vote to an encryption ban throughout the European Union.
Comment les États membres se coordonnent pour répondre face aux cyberattaques.
As the dark clouds of terrorism stalk Europe's shadow, Europol TV sat down with Rob Wainwright, the director of Europol, the union's combatant for fighting serious crime and terrorism. Okay, Mr. Wainwright, thank you so much for joining us on Europol TV. Can you talk to us a bit about the role of Europol? I mean, obviously you weren't set up to work in terrorism itself, but your mandate has changed over the years. So how effective are you as a tool against countering terrorism?
But for over 10 years now, and even before 9/11 actually, we've had a mandate on counter-terrorism as well, and that's certainly grown over the last 10 years, and it's grown again this year since the awful attacks in Paris and in other European locations. So Europol is there to help the police to identify criminals and terrorists and to coordinate operations to prevent them from carrying out the attacks like we've seen this year.
How much do member states allow you to have access to information?
Well, it's more operational certainly than administrative, because we're in the front line of exchanging intelligence about ongoing cases to identify those suspects and to help coordinate some operations. And in the wake of the Paris attacks, for example, we were able to share with the French authorities pretty good intelligence leads, particularly about the financing of those attacks, immediately after the incidents involved. But yes, Europol is not a police force. We're not an FBI. We don't arrest people. We don't have those executive powers. We're there really to provide operational support, intelligence support, and that's something that we're focused on in our field of countering terrorism.
There are people who are saying that post-Paris attacks, your role could evolve even more. And in the meeting that we just had at Parliament, you did mention that Europol is setting up a counter-terrorism unit, a hub for member states. Could you maybe explain a bit more about that and how your role could evolve?
We need international organisations like Europol to provide a more effective response. And what we're focusing on Europol, therefore, is providing that hub so that we can monitor terrorist financing, the flows of illicit firearms in particular, and especially the intelligence picture around these people that are going to and from Syria and Iraq.
But do you think that Europol is maybe blurring lines? I mean, as some MEPs were criticising you for in the meeting, they were saying that you are blurring lines between what is national competence and saying what should be Europol's role.
Well, I think we are we are focused on providing the maximum support, of course, within our legal mandate. We don't overstep that.
But what about the cyber jihadi and the rise of the cyber jihadi? We saw them taking over TV5 Monde.
Well, frankly, I'm a bit surprised that we haven't seen an even greater terrorist dimension online, because the range of attacks, the capability, criminal capability that we have seen developed on the internet in the last 2 years that organised crime groups are using are frankly off the scale in terms of how difficult it is for us to stop that from really damaging our economies and our people's safety. Now terrorist groups, including Islamic State, are catching up using some of the same techniques as well. They're still pretty rudimentary actually in terms of what we're seeing. There's a long way still to go, but I think we are at a stage, we're very concerned about the possibility of a cyber terrorist attack perhaps.
We know that agencies cannot track every suspected or known terrorist, but how do we stop people falling through the crack? Because we did learn, or what we heard after the Paris attacks, was that the French authorities knew of one of the Kouachi brothers having travelled to Yemen.
It is really difficult. I think you're dealing with a large community of potential terrorists, of people who may or may not have gone to Syria and Iraq, may or may not have been to other conflict zones. I think in the case of Paris, French authorities, based on the available information they had deprioritised the case because they hadn't come to notice for almost 10 years. And that says something also about the limits that the police and security services have about how they can deploy their resources. We can't monitor thousands and thousands of people at the same time. Maybe we don't even want that, of course, in our liberal democracy. So this is very much about using the best possible intelligence to prioritise the most important cases. And part of that is about effective information sharing across borders.
So why Europol and say not Interpol?
Because we have better legal mechanism, better expertise, stronger data protection controls and data security controls here in the European Union.
Okay, Mr. Warrior, thank you so much for joining us on Europol TV.
My pleasure, thank you so much.
Mi minden aggasztja jelenleg az Európai Unió lakosait? Egy friss felmérés szerint még mindig a munkanélküliség áll az első helyen, azonban a második helyre előlépett a migránsválság.
Between the 19th and 29th of September 2015, as the migration crisis reached critical intensity, a survey was conducted in 28 member states, with 28,150 citizens above the age of 15. They were asked their views on the European Union and immigration. What are the main challenges the European Union must overcome to face the future? Unemployment still sits at the top, with 49% of people identifying it as the #1 challenge, but immigration has soared in 2 years to second place with 47%. In 9 countries, this issue is important to more than 50% of respondents. And the third priority, terrorism, which has also leaped up the rankings. The majority of Europeans advocate a common global approach to migration policy, with more decisions to be taken at European level. Priority financial support for the member states that are facing the greatest migratory flows. And a common procedure for legal migration. Do we need a better distribution of the asylum seekers among the member states? Nearly 8 in 10 say yes. But there's a big gap between the countries most in favour, such as Germany and Sweden, and the least enthusiastic, such as Slovakia and the Czech Republic. The countries where migrants enter Europe are strongly in favour of a better distribution of asylum seekers. And among those supporters of better distribution, 3 out of 4 believe it should be decided on the basis of binding quotas, but not uniformly across the EU. In Germany, 89% of those in favour support this, and in Slovakia, it's half of the 31%. What pace should be adopted for integration? For 48% of respondents, we should wait until all EU member states are ready. For 41%, the countries that wish to go further shouldn't wait for the other EU member states. Do we need legal migrants to work in certain sectors of the economy? Yes, say an absolute but not clear majority of European respondents. In 19 member states, the number of positive responses didn't reach 50%. The north of the Union is redressing the average. For the large majority of Europeans, the presence of nationals of other member states would also be an asset to the cultural life of the country.
Mennyi alkoholt isznak az Unióban élő fiatalok? Az adatok szerint egyre többet. A szakértők szerint ez annak köszönhető, hogy sok reklámban pozitívnak tüntetik fel az alkoholfogyasztást, ráadásul egyre több olyan ital készül, ami jó ízű, szép színű, viszont alkoholt tartalmaz.
Salut, bienvenue dans AZ. XYZ. A comme alcool. L'alcool défonce, fait des ravages chez les jeunes. Le binge drinking consiste à boire de grandes quantités de boissons alcoolisées sur une très courte période de temps. Le but, atteindre rapidement l'ivresse. L'Union européenne est préoccupée par cette alcoolisation massive. Les pays membres de l'Union sont tous concernés.
Les jeunes Européens se saoulent de plus en plus tôt. Dans cet hôpital hollandais, on soigne des jeunes avec un problème d'alcool dès l'âge de 13 ans, en pédiatrie, chez les enfants. Aux Pays-Bas, le nombre d'hospitalisations pour ivresse de jeunes de moins de 15 ans double chaque année. Et elles augmentent encore plus vite chez les jeunes entre 15 et 24 ans. Ce service spécialisé est unique en son genre, mais il pourrait bien inspirer d'autres hôpitaux européens.
Plus on est jeune et plus l'alcool peut entraîner des dommages physiques et mentaux, car le développement du cerveau s'achève seulement à 23 ans. Ce problème de santé publique inquiète l'Union européenne. Un jeune sur 10 affirme consommer au moins 5 verres d'alcool en une seule soirée, et même plusieurs fois par semaine. À 15 ans, un jeune européen sur 3 déclare consommer de l'alcool toutes les semaines.
Dans la plupart des pays européens, l'âge limite pour acheter des boissons alcoolisées est fixé entre 16 et 18 ans. Cela n'empêche pas la jeunesse européenne d'être victime des ravages de l'alcool. Les États membres de l'Union européenne sont tous concernés. Ils sont en train de rattraper le Royaume-Uni et le Danemark, où l'alcoolisation massive, le binge drinking, fait rage depuis longtemps.
Et ce phénomène ne touche pas que les garçons. Je vous montre. Chez les hommes de 15 à 29 ans, un décès sur 4 est lié à l'abus d'alcool, surtout pour les accidents de voiture. Et l'alcool est responsable d'un décès sur 10 chez les femmes.
Pour réduire le nombre d'accidents causés par l'alcool, l'Union européenne soutient les actions des pays membres. Elle recommande un taux limite d'alcoolémie au volant. Elle appuie également les campagnes contre l'ivresse au volant. Une loi européenne limite déjà la publicité pour l'alcool à la télévision. Elle interdit les pubs qui ciblent les mineurs, mais l'Union européenne veut aller plus loin. Elle demande aux producteurs d'alcool de ne pas attirer les jeunes avec des emballages ou des produits qui les séduisent. C'est le cas des alcool pop, ces boissons sucrées et colorées qui n'ont pas le goût de l'alcool et se boivent comme une simple limonade.
En théorie, les mineurs ne peuvent pas acheter d'alcool. Mais en pratique, l'alcool est accessible à tous. Facile de s'en procurer dans les stations-service ou dans les supermarchés. L'Europe est le continent où la consommation d'alcool par personne est la plus élevée au monde, tous âges confondus. Triste record. Salut!
Facebook barát vagy ellenség? A Europár TV riportere egy olyan nővel beszélgetett, aki egy rockstar iránti rajongása kapcsán tanulta meg, ha valamit a Facebookon megosztasz, az örökké ott marad.
Social media, it connects you to the world, but it has a downside. The internet doesn't forget your drinking bouts or past activities, and they can cost you your livelihood. Dorothy Boulanger is a big fan of Johnny Hallyday, Europe's Elvis. 2 years ago, the rocker fell gravely ill after surgery, and in a fit of anger, she used Facebook to vent her outrage at his doctor.
Je suis comme je suis, voilà, j'ai mes défauts et mes qualités, je réfléchis pas toujours au moment où il faut. Je me l'accorde, il n'y a pas de souci.
Dorothy's rash writings landed her in court in France, where Johnny Halliday's doctor is suing her for defamation, insults and making threats. She could be fined up to €5,000. Dorothy has 4 children and she knows it would be only too easy for them to fall into the same trap.
On a beau les mettre en garde, ça ne veut pas dire qu'ils écoutent. Je crois qu'ils sont tous bien connectés à Facebook en général et que les ados, ils écrivent bien comme ils le pensent, ils l'écrivent sans réfléchir ou retomber.
The law in this matter is worse than a grey area. It's a black hole. As massive and far-reaching as it is, the internet's very young, and it's only in the last few years that people have started to realise how their past actions online can impact on their future.
Les conséquences juridiques de propos tenus sur Facebook, de photos mises sur Facebook, peuvent être considérables. On ne s'en rend pas compte au moment où on le met sur Facebook. On n'imagine pas que la compagnie d'assurance va examiner le profil, on n'imagine pas que le contrôleur des contributions va examiner notre profil, on n'imagine pas que l'employeur va regarder notre profil. Or, tout le monde regarde le profil sur Facebook. Quand vous avez des informations concernant une personne, que faites-vous? Vous tapez le nom sur Google, vous avez le profil Facebook, vous cliquez sur Facebook et vous avez tout.
Writings and photos on the internet are considered proof, enough to get people fired, to void their insurance or land them in court. In coming months, the European Commission will make proposals on the right to be forgotten online, but the measures will take a long time to implement. So what can you do when there's no legal protection and no way to erase things? Former IMF chief Dominique Strauss-Kahn hired a company to bury photos of him in handcuffs, following his arrest in New York on allegations he raped a hotel maid. Pictures of him cuffed are now hard to find. Strauss-Kahn turned to a firm that protects its clients' internet image, their e-reputation. In Belgium, one company is doing similar but more sophisticated work, helping businesses to protect their brand.
Une des façons de procéder, c'est justement de publier un maximum de contenu positif de façon à faire descendre le contenu problématique dans les référencements des moteurs de recherche. C'est une façon comme une autre, le contenu problématique étant toujours disponible, mais il n'est plus visible quelque part sur les premières pages de votre browser Internet.
But people like Dorothy and her family cannot afford such services. Today she's wiser, but those words written in anger will not leave her alone until her court case is over, nor will they spare Johnny Halliday's doctor.
Facebook, c'est une lame à double tranchant. Moi, je trouve ça génial dans le sens où c'est un moyen de communication qui est vraiment intéressant. Et c'est bien, partager des ressentis, partager des choses, mais il faut savoir que c'est quand même un réseau qui est très surveillé. Il n'y a rien qui disparaît, même une discussion en ligne. Même la corbeille, il n'y a pas de corbeille, il n'y a rien. Tout est là. À partir du moment où on tape quelque chose sur Facebook, ça reste, c'est là.
Az Európai Unióban minden negyedik háztartásban van kisállat, általában kutya vagy macska. Mi a helyzet azonban akkor, hogyha a család vakációzni megy, és nem szeretné otthon hagyni kedvencét? Nem kell aggódni, az Európai Unióban ugyanis szabadon szállíthatók a házi állatok, viszont rendelkezniük kell a szükséges dokumentumokkal.
Say hi to Callie. Isn't she as cute as a button? But dogs like Callie are very different. Have you heard the phrase, a dog is for life and not just for Christmas? Well, in the case of Callie, she's just one of many of the abandoned pets you'll find in shelters all across Europe.
This shelter for unwanted pets is in Brussels. The guests are mainly stray cats and dogs. At the moment, there just aren't the rules in place to help animals like these.
Each EU country has its own rules, but generally it's for shelters, charities, and all of you at home to do all they can to help friends like these find homes too.
But the good news is that for domestic pets like cats, dogs, and funnily enough, ferrets, they are protected by EU-wide rules to some extent.
You guys ready?
The rules governing them ensure that these pets can travel across the EU safely and without restriction.
On average, 1 in 4 European households has a pet. Come on, Bimba, time for walkies!
In 2013, there were 64 million cats and 66 million dogs in the EU.
You see, before, travelling with pets wasn't so easy.
Up until a few years ago, if you wanted to take your cat or dog on holiday, they could be put in a kind of quarantine and had to give a blood sample 6 months before travelling to make sure they were disease-free. But what about if you booked a last-minute holiday?
Good girl, come on. Now all you need to do is get yourself down to your vet and get your pet one of these.
For a pet to travel, 3 main conditions must be met.
Each dog, cat or ferrets need to be identified with a microchip or with a tattoo. They need a rabies vaccine within the 30 days if it's the first time they are vaccinated. They need a passport also. Some of the countries need also, they ask also for a deworming treatment within the 5 days before leaving the country.
It's always best to check with your vet if the destination country has set other conditions.
Vaccine check, passport check, doggy check, and now all that's needed is to decide where to go. But remember, you can't take an entire football team of pets with you. If you have more than 5 animals, you have to be able to prove that they are participating in a competition, an exhibition, or a sporting event. Okay, ready? Should we go on our holiday? Ready? Ready? Are you ready? Okay then, let's go. Okay.
Ez volt mára a Ponteu, tartsanak velünk egy hét múlva is, ugyanígy szombaton este 6:30-kor. Viszontlátásra!